The Barrett .50 caliber rifle lay across the maintenance table like a sleeping predator, its matte black finish absorbing the harsh fluorescent light of the aircraft hangar. General Marcus Holloway had seen thousands of weapons in his 32-year career, but something about this particular rifle made him pause mid-stride. His weathered eyes traced the length of the barrel, noting the precision modifications, the upgraded scope mounts, the telltale wear patterns that spoke of countless hours in hostile territory. Then he saw it. Etched into the stock with surgical precision was an emblem that made his blood run cold, a golden chevron surrounding the number 3,200. Not 3,200 rounds fired, not 3,200 missions completed. 3,200 meters. The longest confirmed kill shot in military history belonged to a Canadian sniper at 3,540 meters, but this emblem suggested something that shouldn't exist, something impossible. Whose weapon is this? Holloway's voice carried the authority of a man who had commanded armies, but there was something else there, uncertainty. Tech Sergeant Rodriguez looked up from his clipboard, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air rushing through the open hangar doors. "Ma'am's rifle, sir, Captain Kavanaugh." "Captain who?" The general's brow furrowed. He knew every sniper in the special operations community, every long-range specialist worth their salt. The name meant nothing to him. She's the pilot, sir, A-10 Warthog, but this here's her personal weapon." Holloway felt the world shift slightly on its axis. Pilots didn't carry Barrett .50s. Pilots certainly didn't have confirmed kills at distances that defied physics and common sense. He approached the rifle with the reverence typically reserved for war memorials, noting additional details that painted an increasingly impossible picture. The scope was a Schmidt and Bender, the same model used by the most elite snipers in the world. Modifications to the muzzle brake suggested someone who understood ballistics at a level that took decades to master. Outside, the distinctive whine of turbofan engines announced the return of a flight. Holloway glanced through the hangar opening to see a single A-10 Thunderbolt approaching the runway, its twin engines screaming as it lined up for landing. The aircraft bore the scars of combat, patches where cannon rounds had been deflected, stress marks from high-G maneuvers, the subtle asymmetry that spoke of a machine pushed to its absolute limits and somehow held together by the skill of its pilot. "That her?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Yes, sir, call sign Ghost 79er. The general watched the A-10 touch down with surgical precision, its landing flare executed with the kind of finesse that separated competent pilots from artists. But his eyes kept drifting back to the rifle, to that impossible emblem, to questions that demanded answers he wasn't sure he wanted to hear. Captain Thalia Kavanaugh shut down her engines and began her post-flight checklist, unaware that her carefully guarded secret was about to unravel in the most public way possible. The rifle she'd hoped would remain anonymous among the dozens of weapons in the armory had just caught the attention of the one man with both the clearance and the curiosity to dig deeper. Through the canopy, she could see General Holloway standing beside her weapon, and her stomach dropped like a stone through dark water. The emblem she'd carved in a moment of pride 3 years ago suddenly felt like the heaviest burden she'd ever carried. Some secrets were meant to stay buried, especially when they involved impossible shots taken in defense of brothers-in-arms who would never know how close they'd come to dying. The general's radio crackled to life as he continued studying the rifle. Base command to General Holloway. Priority message from CENTCOM regarding Operation Silent Thunder, classification level Alpha 7. Holloway keyed his radio without taking his eyes off the weapon. "Send it." "Sir, we have an escalating situation. Enemy sniper teams have been neutralizing our forward observers at distances exceeding 2,800 meters. Conventional counter-sniper assets are ineffective. CENTCOM is requesting immediate deployment of our longest-range capabilities." The general's eyes moved from the rifle to the A-10 now taxiing toward the hangar, pieces of an impossible puzzle beginning to fall into place. Rodriguez, I want Captain Kavanaugh in my office in 30 minutes, and bring that rifle. Sir, with respect, she's scheduled for another sortie in. Cancel it. Holloway's voice brooked no argument, and Rodriguez, not a word of this conversation leaves this hangar. The tech sergeant nodded, but his expression suggested he understood they were all standing at the edge of something that would change everything. In the distance, Captain Kavanaugh was climbing down from her cockpit, her flight suit bearing the casual confidence of someone who had faced death 1,000 times and emerged victorious. She moved with the economy of motion that marked true professionals, wasting no energy, every gesture purposeful. But Holloway could see something else in her bearing, a weight that had nothing to do with equipment or fatigue. It was the burden carried by those who had been forced to kill at distances so great that their targets never knew death was coming. The burden of playing God with mathematics and wind calculations. The impossible emblem on the Barrett .50 suddenly felt like the least mysterious thing in the hangar. 28 minutes later, Captain Thalia Kavanaugh stood at attention in General Holloway's temporary office, a converted conference room that smelled of stale coffee and the kind of institutional disinfectant that defined military bases worldwide. The Barrett rifle lay across the general's desk between them like evidence at a court-martial. At ease, Captain. Holloway's voice was carefully neutral, but Thalia had spent enough time around senior officers to recognize the controlled tension beneath his words. She shifted to parade rest, her eyes fixed on a point 6 inches above the general's head, standard protocol when facing potential disciplinary action. Tell me about the emblem. The words hung in the air between them. Thalia felt her carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. For 3 years, she had maintained the perfect cover, competent but unremarkable A-10 pilot, solid performance ratings, no disciplinary actions, no reason for anyone to look too closely at her background or her unusual equipment preferences. Sir, I'm not sure I understand the question. Holloway leaned forward, his weathered hands framing the rifle. 3,200 meters, Captain. That's not a number someone carves into their weapon as a joke or wishful thinking. That's a very specific distance, a record-breaking distance if I'm not mistaken. Thalia's mind raced through possible responses, each one weighed against the security classifications that had defined her previous life. Some truths were buried so deep that even generals weren't supposed to know them. Her original assignment had been compartmentalized beyond normal military protocols, her service record sanitized to the point where she appeared to be exactly what she claimed, a pilot who happened to own expensive shooting equipment. Sir, I enjoy long-range shooting as a hobby. The emblem represents a personal goal. The lie felt like ash in her mouth, but it was the only protection she had left. The real story involved operations that officially never happened, in countries where American forces were never deployed, against targets whose deaths were attributed to local conflicts or mysterious accidents. Holloway studied her face with the intensity of a polygraph machine. In his 3 decades of service, he had learned to read the subtle tells that separated truth from carefully crafted deception. The slight tension around her eyes, the almost imperceptible straightening of her shoulders, the way her breathing had become slightly more controlled, all indicators that Captain Kavanaugh was operating under significant stress. A personal goal, he repeated slowly. And have you achieved this goal, Captain? The question was a trap, and they both knew it. Answer yes, and she would have to explain how a pilot had acquired the skills necessary to make impossible shots. Answer no, and she would have to explain why she was carrying equipment far beyond anything required for recreational shooting. Sir, I prefer not to discuss my private activities. Unfortunately, Captain, your private activities have just become very public. Holloway activated a tablet, displaying satellite imagery that made Thalia's blood turn to ice water. The photographs showed a mountainous region she recognized immediately, the Hindu Kush, where she had spent 6 months as part of a black operations unit that officially never existed. The first image showed a Taliban compound nestled in a valley, surrounded by natural defensive positions that made conventional assault impossible. The second image, taken 47 hours later, showed the same compound abandoned, with clear evidence of sniper activity at ranges that defied conventional military doctrine. 3 years ago, a small unit of Taliban commanders were eliminated by what CENTCOM officially describes as unknown hostile action. Local intelligence attributed the kills to interfactional fighting, but analysis of the ballistics evidence suggested something far more sophisticated. Thalia remained silent, but her hands had unconsciously clenched into fists. Those missions had saved American lives, disrupted enemy communications, and shortened a conflict that could have dragged on for months. She had been proud of her work, proud of the impossible shots that had turned the tide of battles before they could even begin. The longest confirmed kill was measured at 3,247 meters, Holloway continued, his voice carrying the weight of classified information that could destroy careers. Atmospheric conditions suggested the shooter had to compensate for wind speeds exceeding 30 knots, elevation changes of over 1,800 feet, and Coriolis effect calculations that most snipers couldn't perform with a computer, much less in real-time field conditions. The general paused, letting the implications settle between them like radioactive dust. The weapon used was identified as a Barrett M82A1, modified with precision components that matched the specifications of this rifle. Thalia felt the walls closing in around her. The compartmentalization that had protected her for 3 years was unraveling with surgical precision. Someone had connected dots that were never supposed to form a picture, assembled evidence that was meant to remain scattered across classified databases that didn't communicate with each other. "Sir, I have no knowledge of the operations you're describing." "No knowledge," Holloway repeated, making notes on his tablet. "But you do acknowledge ownership of a weapon capable of precision fire at extreme ranges, modified with components that cost more than most pilots make in 6 months." The mathematics of her situation were becoming clear. Every answer she gave created new questions. Every denial demanded more elaborate explanations. She was being slowly but systematically cornered by someone who understood both the technical requirements of extreme-range shooting and the bureaucratic maze of military intelligence operations. Outside the office windows, another flight of A-10s was returning from a training mission, their engines creating a familiar background symphony that had defined her life for the past 3 years. Soon, she would either return to that simple existence or find herself answering questions in rooms where careers went to die. The choice, she realized, had already been taken away from her. General Holloway closed the tablet and leaned back in his chair, studying the young woman before him with renewed interest. Captain Thalia Kavanaugh was clearly more than her service record suggested, but the exact nature of her capabilities remained frustratingly unclear. Her file showed solid but unremarkable performance as an A-10 pilot, standard training scores, and the kind of steady competence that typically resulted in routine assignments and predictable career advancement. But the rifle told a different story entirely. "Captain, I'm going to be direct with you because the current tactical situation requires absolute clarity." Holloway's tone shifted from interrogation to briefing. "We have enemy snipers operating at extreme ranges, neutralizing our forward elements with precision that suggests professional training and high-end equipment. Our conventional counter-sniper assets are ineffective because they lack both the range and the skill set necessary to engage targets at distances exceeding 2,500 meters." Thalia maintained her position of attention, but something flickered in her eyes, a recognition that suggested familiarity with exactly the kind of tactical problem the general was describing. Intelligence reports indicate these enemy snipers are former military, possibly Eastern European or Russian special forces, equipped with precision rifles and trained in advanced ballistics calculations. They have established overwatch positions that dominate key approach routes, effectively creating no-go zones for our ground forces. The general paused to activate a wall-mounted display, showing topographical maps marked with red zones indicating confirmed sniper activity. The scale of the affected area was sobering. Hundreds of square kilometers rendered impassable by a handful of individuals with the right training and equipment. 3 of our forward observers have been killed in the past week, all at ranges exceeding 2,800 meters. The shots were precise enough to penetrate body armor, suggesting match-grade ammunition and exceptional marksmanship skills. Thalia absorbed the tactical briefing with the focused attention of someone who understood the lethality implications of long-range interdiction. Her mind automatically began calculating wind patterns, elevation differentials, and the kind of advanced ballistics that turned shooting into applied physics. CENTCOM has requested immediate deployment of our most capable long-range assets, Holloway continued, but our official sniper teams are limited to effective ranges of approximately 1,800 meters under optimal conditions. The enemy has positioned themselves beyond our conventional capabilities. The trap was becoming clear. The general wasn't just investigating her background. He was building a case for why her unusual skills might be exactly what the current mission required. The mysterious emblem on her rifle had transformed from potential evidence of misconduct into a possible solution for an escalating tactical crisis. Sir, with respect, I'm a pilot, not a sniper. Are you? Holloway's question carried the weight of accumulated evidence. Because everything I've seen suggests otherwise. The weapon modifications, the precision equipment, the mathematical knowledge required to carve that specific distance into your stock, all of it points to capabilities that go far beyond recreational shooting. Thalia felt the familiar weight of decisions that could alter the trajectory of entire operations. For 3 years, she had successfully maintained her cover, flying routine missions, and avoiding the kind of high-profile assignments that attracted scrutiny. But the tactical situation the general described was exactly the kind of challenge that had defined her previous life. Captain, I need to know if you have the capability to engage targets at ranges exceeding 3,000 meters under adverse field conditions. The question hung between them like live ammunition. Answer honestly, and she would be admitting to skills and experience that officially didn't exist. Continue the deception, and American soldiers would continue dying at distances their own forces couldn't match. Sir, hypothetically speaking, what kind of operational parameters are we discussing? Holloway recognized the subtle shift in her language, from denial to qualified engagement. Mountainous terrain, wind speeds up to 40 knots, targets using professional evasion techniques, and rules of engagement that require absolute confirmation before firing. Environmental conditions. Temperature variations from sub-freezing to 40 degrees Celsius, altitude changes exceeding 3,000 feet, and visibility limited by weather and terrain features. Thalia found herself automatically processing the tactical variables, her mind falling back into patterns of analysis that had once been second nature. The challenge was significant but not impossible, assuming the shooter possessed both the technical skills and the psychological conditioning necessary to execute precision fire under extreme stress. How many targets? Unknown, possibly 6 to 10 individuals operating in coordinated teams. The scope of the mission was becoming clear. Not just one impossible shot, but a systematic campaign to neutralize multiple high-value targets operating in defended positions across difficult terrain. It was exactly the kind of operation that required capabilities existing in the shadow spaces between official military doctrine and plausible deniability. Sir, if such an operation were to be conducted, what kind of support structure would be available? Holloway smiled for the first time since discovering the rifle. Whatever you need, Captain, whatever you need. The admission hung in the air between them like a confession. Both officers understood they had crossed a line from investigation into operational planning, from questioning past activities to designing future missions that would require the same impossible skills. 3 hours later, Captain Thalia Kavanaugh found herself in a secure briefing room deep within the base's intelligence complex, surrounded by maps, satellite imagery, and the kind of detailed tactical intelligence that preceded high-risk operations. The transition from potential disciplinary action to mission planning had occurred with the bureaucratic efficiency that characterized military decision-making when lives hung in the balance. General Holloway had assembled a small team of specialists, communications experts, intelligence analysts, and logistics coordinators, each cleared for the kind of compartmentalized information that defined black operations. The atmosphere in the room carried the focused tension of professionals preparing for work that officially wouldn't happen. The target area extends across approximately 400 square kilometers of mountainous terrain, began Major Sarah Chen, the intelligence briefing officer. Enemy sniper teams have established overwatch positions that control 3 critical supply routes and 2 potential helicopter landing zones. The wall-mounted displays showed high-resolution topographical maps with overlaid threat assessments, marked with red zones indicating confirmed enemy positions and yellow areas suggesting likely hiding spots. The scale of the operational area was daunting, finding and neutralizing multiple enemy teams across terrain that offered thousands of potential firing positions. Weather patterns suggest optimal shooting conditions will be limited to approximately 4-hour windows during early morning hours, continued Major Chen. Wind speeds typically decrease to manageable levels between 500 and 900 hours, with visibility improving after dawn fog dissipates. Thalia studied the intelligence displays with the focused attention of someone who understood that every detail could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Her mind automatically began processing ballistic calculations, identifying potential shooting positions, and analyzing the complex geometry required to engage multiple targets across such diverse terrain. What kind of intelligence do we have on enemy movement patterns? Limited but consistent, replied Captain Martinez from the communications section. They appear to rotate positions every 48 to 72 hours, maintaining radio silence except for brief burst transmissions during predetermined windows. Equipment assessment. High-end precision rifles, likely accuracy international or similar platforms, with advanced optics and environmental monitoring systems. Ammunition appears to be match-grade, suggesting professional supply chains rather than improvised local sources. The briefing continued for 2 hours, building a comprehensive picture of an enemy that combined professional military training with intimate knowledge of local terrain and weather patterns. They were facing adversaries who understood the same principles of extreme-range shooting that Thalia had mastered during her classified assignments. Mission timeline, she asked, though part of her already knew the answer. General Holloway leaned forward. 48 hours. We have a supply convoy that needs to transit the affected area, and current intelligence suggests the enemy is positioning additional assets to interdict that movement. 2 days to plan, equip, and execute a mission that would require her to remember skills she had spent 3 years trying to forget. 2 days to transition from anonymous pilot back to the kind of precision shooter whose work was measured in lives saved rather than targets eliminated. What kind of insertion method are we considering? That depends on your operational preferences, Holloway replied. We can provide helicopter transport, ground infiltration, or, he paused meaningfully, alternative insertion methods that might utilize your primary skill set. The implication was clear. She could approach the target area on foot like a conventional sniper, or she could use her A-10 to establish overwatch positions that would be impossible for ground-based operators to achieve. Flying overwatch would provide superior positioning, but would compromise stealth after the first engagement. Understood. What do you need to make this work? Thalia looked around the room at the assembled specialists, each representing a different aspect of the support structure required for complex operations. For 3 years, she had operated as a single pilot responsible only for her aircraft and her mission. Now she was being asked to become the center of an operation that would require coordination across multiple specialties and risk levels. I need access to the rifle and specialized ammunition. I need detailed weather forecasts updated hourly. I need communications equipment that can maintain contact across the operational area. And I need absolute assurance that this mission has proper authorization. Done, 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 and here. Holloway slid a folder across the table containing authorization documents bearing signatures that made Thalia's security clearance seem quaint by comparison. She opened the folder and scanned the operational orders, noting the carefully constructed language that would protect everyone involved if the mission went wrong. The bureaucratic poetry of plausible deniability wrapped around tactical objectives that were remarkably clear. One more thing, she said, closing the folder. I work alone. No spotters, no backup, no real-time oversight. This kind of shooting requires absolute concentration and split-second timing that can't accommodate committee decisions. The room fell silent as the assembled specialists processed the implications. Most military operations emphasized redundancy and backup systems, multiple layers of support and oversight designed to minimize individual risk and maximize mission success probability. Understood, Holloway replied after a moment, but you'll have full communications support and emergency extraction capabilities. Thalia nodded, already beginning the mental transition from pilot to sniper, from team player to solo operator, whose success or failure would be measured in American lives saved or lost. The familiar weight of absolute responsibility was settling across her shoulders like an old, uncomfortable jacket that still fit perfectly. Outside the briefing room, the sun was setting over the airfield where her A-10 sat waiting for a mission that might never come. In less than 48 hours, she would either be back in that cockpit preparing for routine patrol flights, or she would be answering questions about operations that officially never happened. The Barrett .50 caliber rifle had been returned to the armory, but Thalia could feel its weight as if it were still strapped across her shoulders. Some burdens, she realized, never really went away. They just waited patiently for the moment when they would be needed again. Dawn broke over the forward operating base with the crystalline clarity that marked optimal shooting conditions. Captain Thalia Kavanaugh had been awake for 37 hours, but her mind carried the sharp focus that adrenaline and necessity could provide when lives depended on precision performance. She moved through her equipment check with the methodical attention to detail that separated professionals from casualties. The Barrett M82A1 had been reconfigured overnight by armory specialists who understood the specific requirements of extreme-range shooting. New scope mounts, upgraded bipod systems, and match-grade .50 BMG ammunition that cost more per round than most soldiers made in a day. Each cartridge was individually measured and weighted, environmental factors calculated to compensate for the atmospheric conditions they would encounter in the target area. Weather update, ma'am. Sergeant Rodriguez handed her a tablet displaying meteorological data that would determine whether the mission proceeded or was postponed until conditions improved. Wind speeds, temperature variations, barometric pressure changes, all the environmental variables that could turn a perfect shot into a catastrophic miss. Wind speeds decreasing to 12 knots from the southwest, temperature stable at -7 Celsius, visibility improving to 8 kilometers, she read aloud, processing the data through mental calculations that had once been automatic. Acceptable conditions. General Holloway approached her position near the helicopter landing zone, his expression carrying the weight of operational decisions that would affect dozens of lives over the next few hours. Behind him, the US-60 Blackhawk that would carry her to the insertion point sat with rotors slowly spinning, its crew completing final pre-flight checks. "Final intelligence update," he said, handing her a sealed envelope. "Enemy positions confirmed as of 4:30 hours. No significant changes from yesterday's briefing, but 2 additional heat signatures detected in grid square 77. More targets meant more complications, more variables to track across terrain that already presented significant challenges. But it also meant more American soldiers would remain alive if the mission succeeded. Rules of engagement remain unchanged. Confirmed. Positive identification required before engagement. Priority targets are those directly threatening the supply convoy route. Collateral damage must be minimized." Thalia nodded, slipping the intelligence envelope into her tactical vest beside the other essential equipment: range finder, wind meter, ballistics calculator, and emergency communication gear. The weight distribution was familiar, even after 3 years away from this kind of work. Estimated time on target: 47 minutes by helicopter, plus approach time to establish overwatch positions. Holloway paused, studying her face with the intensity of someone trying to read uncertainty in a situation where doubt could prove fatal. "Captain, are you confident in your ability to execute this mission?" The question carried implications that went beyond simple tactical assessment. Success would mean the convoy could proceed safely, ground forces could resume normal operations, and the enemy sniper threat would be neutralized. Failure would mean more American casualties, continued disruption of supply lines, and the possibility that her own position would be compromised. "Sir, the mission is within acceptable parameters." It was the kind of carefully neutral response that conveyed confidence without making promises that circumstances beyond her control might prevent her from keeping. She had learned years ago that hubris was more dangerous than enemy fire when it came to operations requiring this level of precision. The helicopter crew chief appeared at her shoulder, speaking over the increasing rotor noise. "Ma'am, we're ready for departure. Insertion point Echo 7, flight time 47 minutes. Thalia shouldered her equipment and walked toward the Blackhawk, feeling the familiar transformation that occurred when training became operational reality. Her mind was already shifting into the focused state that would be necessary for the next 8 hours. Complete awareness of environmental conditions, absolute concentration on ballistic calculations, and the psychological conditioning required to take human lives at distances where the targets would never know death was approaching. The helicopter lifted off into the pre-dawn darkness, its navigation lights quickly disappearing as the aircraft transitioned to blackout flight procedures. Below, the base continued its routine activities: morning briefings, equipment maintenance, and the thousand small tasks that maintained military readiness. But in the briefing room where her mission had been planned, General Holloway stood before the tactical displays, with the expression of someone who understood that the next few hours would determine whether he had made the right decision in trusting capabilities that officially didn't exist. The risk assessment was stark. Either Captain Kavanaugh possessed the skills necessary to neutralize a professional enemy sniper team, or American soldiers would continue dying, while their own forces remained helpless to respond. Radio communications crackled to life as the helicopter reached the halfway point to the insertion zone. "Ghost 79er, this is base command. Weather update shows conditions remain stable, enemy activity unchanged from last report. Thalia keyed her radio with one hand while checking her rifle's scope settings with the other. Base command, Ghost 79er. Acknowledged. ETA to insertion point 23 minutes. Through the helicopter's windows, the terrain below was transitioning from the relatively flat approaches around the base to the mountainous region where enemy snipers had established their overwatch positions. The landscape looked peaceful in the early morning light, giving no indication of the lethal game of precision shooting that was about to unfold across its ridges and valleys. "Final equipment check, ma'am," called the crew chief over the intercom. Thalia ran through her mental checklist one more time. Rifles zeroed and confirmed, ammunition calculated for environmental conditions, communication equipment tested, emergency extraction procedures reviewed. Everything was as ready as training and preparation could make it. In 23 minutes, she would be back in the business of impossible shots. The helicopter descended toward the insertion point with the controlled precision that marked experienced combat pilots. Below, landing zone Echo 7 appeared exactly as the reconnaissance photographs had indicated, a small clearing surrounded by rocky outcroppings that would provide concealment during the transition from air transport to ground operations. Captain Thalia Kavanaugh felt the familiar pre-mission calm settling over her consciousness like a comfortable blanket. Her breathing had become deeper and more controlled, her heart rate stabilizing despite the adrenaline that would soon be required for precision performance. These were the final moments before training became execution, when theoretical knowledge transformed into life-or-death decisions measured in millimeters and milliseconds. 1 minute to insertion, announced the crew chief, his voice professional despite the inherent risks of delivering a single operator into terrain controlled by enemy forces with a demonstrated capability for extreme-range interdiction. Through the helicopter's window, she could see the target area spread below like a three-dimensional tactical puzzle. Ridge lines that offered potential shooting positions, valleys that provided concealment for movement, and the complex interplay of elevation and distance that would determine success or failure over the next several hours. Her mind automatically began processing the geographical relationships, identifying the optimal overwatch positions that would provide clear lines of sight to the areas where enemy snipers had been detected. The mathematics were complex but familiar, ballistic trajectories curved by gravity and wind, complicated by elevation changes and atmospheric conditions that could turn a perfect shot into a near miss. 30 seconds. Thalia checked her equipment one final time, ensuring that every piece of gear was secured properly for the transition from helicopter to ground operations. The Barrett rifle was slung across her back with the kind of careful attention that expensive precision instruments required. Her tactical vest contained everything necessary for 8 hours of independent operation: water, energy bars, additional ammunition, and emergency communication equipment. The helicopter touched down with the soft precision that characterized experienced military pilots, its skids settling onto rocky ground that showed no evidence of the enemy presence that intelligence reports had confirmed throughout the surrounding area. Go, go, go. She was out of the aircraft and moving toward the tree line before the rotors had completed their first rotation after touchdown. Behind her, the Black Hawk lifted off immediately, disappearing into the early morning sky with the kind of rapid departure that minimized exposure to enemy observation and potential surface-to-air threats. Suddenly, she was alone. The silence was profound after hours of helicopter noise and radio chatter. No engine sounds, no human voices, no mechanical distractions from the natural environment that would be her operational arena for the remainder of the mission. Only wind moving through pine trees, distant bird calls, and the subtle sounds that marked wilderness areas undisturbed by human presence. Thalia spent the first 10 minutes motionless, allowing her senses to adjust to ground operations while scanning the surrounding terrain for any indication of enemy observation. This was the most vulnerable phase of the mission. A single operator with equipment that clearly identified her as a high-value target, moving through terrain where enemy snipers had demonstrated both the capability and willingness to engage at extreme ranges. Her radio crackled softly. Ghost 79er base command. Insertion confirmed, mission clock is now active. Base command Ghost 79er. Insertion complete, proceeding to Overwatch position Alpha. The first objective was a ridge line approximately 1,200 meters from her current location, elevated enough to provide visual contact with the valleys where enemy activity had been detected. The approach would require careful movement through terrain that offered concealment, but also limited her ability to observe potential threats until she was within engagement range. She began moving uphill with the deliberate pace that characterized professional operators, fast enough to maintain tactical momentum, slow enough to avoid the kind of noise or movement signatures that would attract unwanted attention. Each step was placed carefully. Each pause used to scan the surrounding area for any indication that her presence had been detected. The weight of the Barrett rifle across her shoulders was both familiar and strange after 3 years of flying missions where her primary weapon was a 30mm GAU-8 Avenger cannon mounted in the nose of an A-10 Warthog. The transition from air-to-ground operations required a fundamental shift in tactical thinking, from high-speed engagement at multiple target sets to patient stalking of individual high-value targets. 43 minutes after insertion, she reached Overwatch position Alpha. The view was breathtaking and tactically perfect. Below her, 3 valleys converged in a natural choke point that would be ideal for interdicting supply convoys or isolating ground forces. Ridge lines on the opposite sides of each valley provided countless potential hiding spots for snipers with the training and equipment to dominate the entire area. Thalia deployed her rifle on its bipod and began the systematic scanning that would identify enemy positions through the subtle signs that marked professional hide sites: unnatural shadows, vegetation disturbances, or the brief reflection of optical equipment that revealed human presence in otherwise empty terrain. Her radio crackled softly with an intelligence update. Ghost 79er, base command. Convoy departure confirmed for 1100 hours. Enemy activity detected in grid squares 66 and 77. She keyed her radio with minimal pressure, maintaining the kind of low-profile communications that characterized solo operations. Base command, Ghost 79er, acknowledged, beginning target acquisition. Through the scope of her Barrett rifle, the distant ridge lines transformed from peaceful mountain scenery into a complex tactical environment where every shadow might conceal a threat, and every movement could indicate either enemy presence or natural wildlife activity. The hunt had begun. 2 hours into the mission, Captain Thalia Kavanaugh had identified 3 potential enemy positions across the valley complex spread below her Overwatch point. The process of target acquisition at extreme ranges required patience that bordered on meditation. Long periods of motionless observation interrupted by brief moments of adjustment as environmental conditions changed or new intelligence became available. Through her rifle scope, set to maximum magnification, she could distinguish between natural terrain features and the subtle anomalies that indicated human modification. A shadow that fell at the wrong angle, vegetation bent in patterns inconsistent with wind direction, and the barely visible geometric lines that marked camouflaged equipment positions. Base command Ghost 79er. 3 possible positions identified, grid references 66 Alpha, 66 Charlie, and 77 Bravo. Request confirmation of target priorities. The response came immediately, indicating that her radio traffic was being monitored closely by intelligence specialists who understood the tactical implications of each potential engagement. Ghost 79er Base Command. Priority Sequence 77 Bravo, 66 Alpha, 66 Charlie. Convoy ETA 47 minutes. Less than an hour before American soldiers would be moving through terrain dominated by enemy snipers, with demonstrated capability to engage at ranges exceeding 2,800 meters. The mathematical precision required for the next phase of her mission would determine whether those soldiers returned alive or became casualties of an enemy that had mastered the art of killing at impossible distances. Thalia shifted her rifle toward grid reference 77 Bravo, a rocky outcropping approximately 3,100 meters from her position. The range was at the upper limit of what most military snipers considered feasible, but well within the capabilities she had developed during classified operations that officially never occurred. Environmental conditions were optimal, wind speed steady at 14 knots from the southwest, temperature stable at -4°C, atmospheric pressure holding constant at the levels that produced predictable ballistic performance. Every factor that could be calculated and compensated for was working in her favor. Through the scope, she began the systematic process of identifying her target within the camouflage position. Enemy snipers at this level of professionalism would be nearly invisible to conventional observation, but certain activities were unavoidable. The brief movement of shifting position, the reflection of optical equipment, or the heat signature that thermal imaging could detect even through carefully constructed hide sights. A flicker of movement, barely perceptible against the rocky background. Someone adjusting their position or checking equipment within the hide site. The movement was too deliberate and controlled to be wildlife, too brief to be natural vegetation responding to wind patterns. "Contact," she whispered into her radio, so softly that the transmission barely registered above background static. "Target acquired, 77 Bravo. Range 3,127 meters, wind compensation calculated." The crosshairs of her scope settled on the area where movement had been detected. At this distance, her target would be little more than a shadow within shadows, a human outline that required absolute precision to distinguish from the surrounding terrain. The margin for error was measured in inches at a range where most people couldn't even see the target location with the naked eye. Her breathing slowed to the controlled rhythm that preceded precision shooting. Each heartbeat became a factor in the timing calculations, each slight shift in wind direction requiring immediate adjustment to her aim point. The mathematical complexity of a 3,100-meter shot involved dozens of variables that had to be processed simultaneously and translated into the minute adjustments that meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Ghost 79er Base Command. Convoy movement initiated, ETA 34 minutes to danger area. 34 minutes before American soldiers would enter the kill zone that enemy snipers had spent days preparing. Her next shot would determine whether those soldiers continued their mission safely or became casualties of an enemy that had turned long-range shooting into a precise instrument of tactical control. Through the scope, another brief movement confirmed the target's location. Someone was preparing for their own shot, adjusting equipment or acquiring targets in the valley below. The enemy sniper was probably calculating the same ballistic variables that occupied her attention, preparing to engage American forces with the same precision mathematics that had made them so effective over the past weeks. The irony was not lost on her. Two professional snipers, separated by more than 3 kilometers of mountainous terrain, each using advanced ballistics to achieve tactical objectives that would determine the outcome of ground operations, neither would directly observe. Her finger found the trigger with the gentle pressure that preceded every precision shot. The Barrett's trigger was set to break cleanly at exactly 3.5 pounds of pressure, allowing for the kind of controlled release that was essential when shooting at distances where atmospheric conditions could deflect a bullet by several feet. Wind speed holding steady. Temperature stable. Range confirmed at 3,127 meters. Elevation adjustment calculated. Windage compensation applied. She took a breath, released half of it, and began the final pressure that would send a .50 caliber bullet across more than 3 kilometers of mountain air at a velocity that would reach the target before the sound of the shot could provide any warning. The Barrett recoiled with the controlled violence that characterized precision rifles designed for extreme-range work. The muzzle brake redirected propellant gases to minimize the weapon's movement, but the fundamental physics of launching a heavy projectile at supersonic velocities created forces that had to be managed rather than eliminated. Through the scope, she tracked the bullet's flight path across the valley, watching for the impact that would occur approximately 4 seconds after firing. At this range, environmental factors could deflect the projectile significantly, requiring immediate assessment of shot placement and rapid adjustment for follow-up shots if necessary. Impact. The distinctive signature of a .50 caliber bullet striking human tissue was visible even at extreme range, a brief spray of material that indicated successful target engagement. No movement from the enemy position suggested that the shot had been immediately effective, eliminating the threat without providing opportunity for counterfire or evasion. Base Command Ghost 79er, Target 77 Bravo neutralized, moving to acquire Target 66 Alpha. Ghost 79er Base Command, confirmed, Convoy ETA 28 minutes. She shifted her rifle toward the second priority target, located on a different ridgeline approximately 2,940 meters from her position. The environmental calculations would be similar but not identical, slight differences in elevation, wind patterns affected by local terrain features, and the atmospheric conditions that could change significantly even across relatively short distances in mountainous regions. The process of target acquisition began again, but with the added pressure of time constraints and the knowledge that her first shot had announced her presence to any other enemy forces in the operational area. Professional snipers worked in teams, and the elimination of one shooter would trigger immediate responses from others who understood that their positions had been compromised. Her radio crackled with an urgent update. Ghost 79er, Base Command. Heat signatures detected moving from 66 Charlie toward your position. Estimated distance 1,800 meters and closing. The tactical situation had just become significantly more complicated. While she was engaging targets at extreme range, other enemy forces were maneuvering to eliminate her overwatch position. She was about to become both hunter and hunted, required to engage multiple targets while avoiding the kind of precision fire she had just demonstrated was possible in this terrain. Base Command Ghost 79er, acknowledged, continuing mission. Through her scope, she could see movement in the target area designated 66 Alpha. Someone was repositioning rapidly, probably responding to the sound of her first shot, and attempting to either acquire her position or evacuate before becoming the next target. The window for a clean shot was closing rapidly. Environmental conditions remained stable, but the human factors had changed dramatically. Her target was now aware that hostile sniper fire was present in the operational area and would be taking evasive measures that made precision engagement significantly more difficult. Range 2,943 meters. Wind compensation calculated. Target moving erratically but following predictable paths dictated by available cover. She led the target by approximately 6 feet, accounting for movement speed and the time required for her bullet to cross the distance between firing position and impact point. At extreme ranges, engaging moving targets required ballistic calculations that bordered on intuitive mathematics, too complex for conscious processing, but manageable through trained reflexes developed over thousands of practice rounds. The shot broke cleanly, sending another .50 caliber projectile across the valley toward a target that might or might not be in the calculated position when the bullet arrived 4 seconds later. Impact confirmed. Target 66 Alpha eliminated. But her radio was already crackling with updates that indicated the tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. Ghost 79er, Base Command. Multiple enemy contacts converging on your position from 3 different directions. Recommend immediate extraction. She had eliminated 2 of 3 priority targets, but enemy forces were now actively hunting her with the kind of coordinated movement that suggested professional military training and intimate knowledge of local terrain. The mission was transforming from precision shooting to combat survival. Base Command Ghost 79er, negative on extraction. Convoy still requires overwatch support. The third target, located at grid reference 66 Charlie, remained operational and capable of interdicting American forces during their transit through the valley. Abandoning her position would mean accepting casualties that her continued presence could prevent, but remaining meant facing odds that were rapidly shifting against her survival. Through her scope, she could see movement from multiple enemy positions as forces that had been concealed throughout the operational area began converging on her overwatch point. The professional sniper team she had been sent to eliminate was larger and better coordinated than intelligence estimates had suggested. In 18 minutes, American soldiers would enter a kill zone that she might not be able to protect. Captain Thalia Kavanaugh made the tactical decision that would define the remainder of her military career. Instead of preparing for extraction, she began calculating the ballistic requirements for engaging multiple targets in rapid succession, while enemy forces maneuvered to eliminate her position. The mathematics were complex, but the moral arithmetic was simple. American soldiers were depending on her ability to neutralize threats they couldn't even see, much less engage effectively. Her survival was secondary to their successful completion of a mission that had strategic implications far beyond this single valley engagement. She shifted her rifle toward the final priority target and began the controlled breathing that preceded precision shooting under extreme stress. The hunt was about to become significantly more challenging. The third target at grid reference 66 Charlie had disappeared from its original position, forcing Captain Thalia Kavanaugh to scan a much wider area, while enemy forces continued their coordinated approach toward her overwatch point. Professional snipers didn't remain stationary after their positions had been compromised, and the enemy shooter she needed to eliminate had obviously begun evasive maneuvers designed to complicate her targeting solution. Base Command Ghost 79er, Target 66 Charlie has relocated, expanding search pattern. Her radio crackled with increasing urgency. Ghost 79er, Base Command. Enemy forces now within 1,200 meters of your position and advancing along multiple approach routes. Convoy ETA 14 minutes. 14 minutes to locate and eliminate a mobile target, while avoiding capture or elimination by forces that understood her tactical significance and were willing to risk significant casualties to neutralize her overwatch capability. The mathematical precision required for extreme-range shooting was becoming secondary to the survival skills necessary for evading professional hunters in terrain that offered limited escape routes. Through her scope, she detected movement approximately 400 meters from the original target location, someone moving rapidly between covered positions with the kind of tactical discipline that marked professional military training. The range was now 2,760 meters, still extreme but more manageable than her previous shots. But the target was moving unpredictably, using terrain features and natural cover to minimize exposure while relocating to a position that would provide clear shots at the convoy route. She was watching an enemy sniper execute the same kind of tactical movement she would use in similar circumstances. Her breathing steadied as she began leading the target, calculating the intersection point where her bullet would arrive simultaneously with the enemy sniper's movement between covered positions. The mathematical complexity was manageable, but the psychological pressure was enormous. Miss this shot, and American soldiers would die while she was hunted down by forces that were now less than a kilometer from her position. The crosshairs settled ahead of the target's movement path, range 2,761 meters, environmental conditions stable, target speed estimated at 4 meters per second, time to impact calculated at 3.7 seconds. She squeezed the trigger with the controlled pressure that had become automatic after thousands of practice rounds and dozens of operational engagements that officially never happened. The Barrett recoiled against her shoulder as the .50 caliber projectile began its journey across the valley, carrying with it the mathematical precision of ballistic calculations and the desperate hope that American soldiers would complete their mission without becoming casualties of an enemy that had turned patience and precision into tactical dominance. Through the scope, she tracked the bullet's path toward the intersection point where her target should appear if her calculations were correct. At this range, even minor errors in estimation could result in complete misses that would leave the enemy sniper operational and her own position compromised without achieving tactical objectives. Impact. The target appeared at the calculated position exactly as the bullet arrived, creating the distinctive signature of successful engagement at extreme range. The enemy sniper's movement stopped abruptly, confirming that the third priority target had been eliminated and the immediate threat to convoy operations had been neutralized. Base Command Ghost 79er, Target 66 Charlie neutralized, all priority targets eliminated. Ghost 79er Base Command, confirmed, convoy proceeding through danger area, enemy forces now within 800 meters of your position. She had completed her primary mission, but the tactical situation remained critical. Enemy forces were continuing their approach despite the elimination of their sniper team, suggesting that her capture or elimination had become a priority objective that justified significant risk and resource expenditure. The time had come to transition from precision shooting to combat survival. Thalia began breaking down her rifle position with the efficient movements that characterized professional operators under extreme time pressure. The Barrett was disassembled into portable components that could be carried during rapid movement through difficult terrain, while essential equipment was redistributed for maximum mobility. Her radio provided constant updates on enemy movement as intelligence specialists tracked the converging forces through satellite imagery and electronic surveillance. Ghost 79er, Base Command. 3 separate groups advancing along ridge lines Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. Estimated 12 to 15 personnel total. 15 enemy soldiers hunting a single operator through terrain they knew intimately. The odds were not encouraging, but her extraction route had been planned to take advantage of natural choke points and defensible positions that could offset numerical disadvantage through tactical positioning and superior equipment. Base Command Ghost 79er, beginning extraction sequence Echo 7. She moved away from her overwatch position with the controlled haste that balanced speed against the noise discipline necessary to avoid detection during the initial phases of evasion. Behind her, the valley where she had engaged 3 targets at impossible ranges was returning to the peaceful appearance that concealed the deadly game of precision shooting that had just concluded. But her radio was already crackling with new intelligence that would complicate the extraction significantly. Ghost 79er, Base Command. Additional enemy forces detected establishing blocking positions along extraction routes Alpha and Bravo. Route Charlie remains clear, but involves significantly greater exposure time. The enemy had anticipated her most likely escape routes and positioned forces to intercept her before she could reach the designated extraction point. Professional military thinking, applied to a tactical situation where her elimination had become more important than their own survival. Route Charlie would take her across open ground that provided clear fields of fire for anyone with the patience to establish overwatch positions along her likely path of movement. But it was the only remaining option for reaching the helicopter landing zone where extraction had been arranged. Base Command Ghost 79er, proceeding via Route Charlie, ETA to extraction point 43 minutes. 43 minutes of movement through terrain where enemy forces with local knowledge were attempting to establish killing fields that would eliminate her before she could reach safety. The precision shooting phase of her mission had been replaced by the kind of close-quarters tactical problem that required different skills but equally deadly consequences for failure. She began moving toward the extraction point with the deliberate pace that characterized professional evasion, fast enough to maintain tactical momentum, careful enough to avoid the signatures that would reveal her position to forces that were actively hunting her with coordinated search patterns. The sky above remained the clear blue that had provided optimal shooting conditions throughout the morning, but now it felt exposed and dangerous rather than tactically advantageous. Enemy forces with the right equipment could track her movement from elevated positions that provided clear observation of the terrain she needed to cross. Her radio crackled with an update that made her situation even more precarious. Ghost 79er, Base Command. Convoy has successfully transited danger area without casualties. Mission objective achieved. The American soldiers she had been sent to protect were now safe, continuing their mission without ever knowing how close they had come to being eliminated by enemy snipers operating at ranges that defied conventional military doctrine. Her impossible shots had saved lives that would never be officially acknowledged in after-action reports or commendation recommendations. But she was still being hunted by forces that understood her tactical significance and were willing to risk everything to prevent her extraction. 29 minutes to the helicopter landing zone, assuming she could avoid the multiple enemy teams that were repositioning to intercept her movement along the only remaining viable escape route. The mathematics of survival had replaced the mathematics of precision shooting, but the stakes remained exactly the same. Captain Thalia Kavanaugh moved through the mountainous terrain with the fluid efficiency that marked operators who had learned to balance speed against stealth under conditions where detection meant death. Behind her, enemy forces were executing search patterns that demonstrated professional military training and intimate knowledge of local geography that gave them significant tactical advantages. Her radio provided continuous updates on enemy movement as intelligence specialists tracked the coordinated hunt through satellite imagery and electronic surveillance assets positioned throughout the operational area. The enemy forces pursuing her were not random militia or hastily organized insurgents. They moved with the disciplined precision that characterized special operations units with extensive training in small unit tactics. Ghost 79er, Base Command. Enemy Alpha Group has established overwatch positions covering the northern approach to extraction point Echo 7. Bravo Group is moving to block the eastern route. Charlie Group appears to be setting up a blocking position approximately 800 meters from your current location. The tactical picture was becoming increasingly constrained. Multiple enemy teams were establishing interlocking fields of fire that would create killing zones along every viable approach to the helicopter landing zone, where her extraction had been scheduled. The coordination required for such positioning indicated command and control capabilities that exceeded initial intelligence estimates. Base Command Ghost 79er. Request immediate extraction at alternate location. Current LZ appears compromised. Ghost 79er Base Command. Negative on alternate extraction. Terrain restrictions and enemy air defense capabilities limit helicopter operations to predetermined landing zones. Continue toward Echo 7. She was committed to reaching the original extraction point despite enemy forces that were systematically closing off her options for safe approach. The helicopter crew would be taking enormous risks to retrieve her from a landing zone that might be under direct observation or fire when they arrived. Moving through a narrow valley that provided concealment but also restricted her options for evasive maneuver, she could hear the distant sounds of enemy movement, equipment shifting, brief radio communications, and the subtle noise signatures that marked professional soldiers conducting tactical operations in difficult terrain. The enemy was close enough that operational security required absolute silence during movement between covered positions. Every footstep had to be placed carefully to avoid loose rocks or vegetation that might create sound signatures detectable by forces that were actively listening for any indication of her location. Base Command Ghost 79er, enemy contact imminent. Request permission to engage if necessary. Ghost 79er, Base Command. You are authorized to engage hostile forces as required for survival and extraction. Rules of engagement remain in effect. Permission to fight her way to the extraction point, using whatever methods the tactical situation demanded. The precision shooting phase of her mission had been replaced by close-quarters combat that would require different skills but equally lethal application. Through the trees ahead, she could see movement that indicated enemy forces had established a checkpoint along her most direct route to the landing zone. Professional positioning that created overlapping fields of fire while providing covered positions for the soldiers manning the blocking position. Her options were becoming limited to tactical choices that involved significant risk regardless of which alternative she selected. Attempt to bypass the enemy checkpoint through terrain that offered minimal concealment, or engage the blocking force with weapons and ammunition that had been selected for precision shooting rather than sustained firefight. The Barrett .50 caliber rifle components strapped to her back would be effective against personnel targets, but were not designed for rapid engagement of multiple enemies in close proximity. Her sidearm provided better tactical flexibility, but limited range and stopping power against professional soldiers, equipped with body armor and military-grade weapons. She moved to within 200 meters of the enemy checkpoint and began the tactical assessment that would determine her approach for the final phase of extraction. 3 soldiers in prepared positions with interlocking fields of fire, equipped with automatic weapons and protected by natural cover that would require precise shot placement to neutralize effectively. Base Command Ghost 79er. Enemy checkpoint confirmed. 3 personnel prepared positions. Engaging. The tactical situation required immediate action before enemy forces could complete their positioning or receive reinforcement from other teams that were converging on the extraction area. Hesitation would only improve their defensive preparation while reducing her options for successful engagement. She assembled the Barrett rifle with the efficient movements that had become automatic through thousands of hours of training and operational experience. At 200 meters, the massive .50 caliber cartridge would be devastating against personnel targets, but the weapon's length and weight made rapid engagement of multiple targets significantly more challenging than precision shooting at extreme ranges. The first target was positioned behind a fallen log that provided excellent protection against small arms fire, but would not stop a .50 caliber bullet traveling at supersonic velocity. The range was so close that ballistic calculations became simple geometry. Point of aim equaled point of impact with minimal compensation for environmental factors. She settled the crosshairs on the center of the target's torso and squeezed the trigger with the controlled pressure that had become second nature after years of precision shooting. The Barrett recoiled against her shoulder as the massive projectile covered the distance to the target almost instantaneously. Impact confirmed. Target eliminated. The remaining 2 enemy soldiers began immediate suppressive fire in her direction, forcing her to seek covered positions, while attempting to acquire clear shots at targets that were now aware of her location and responding with professional fire discipline. Automatic weapons fire impacted the trees around her position, creating the distinctive sound signatures of high-velocity bullets passing close enough to be potentially lethal. The enemy was using sustained fire to suppress her position while maneuvering to flank or eliminate her through coordinated movement. She shifted position rapidly, using natural cover to break visual contact while seeking a firing position that would provide clear engagement opportunities. The tactical situation had devolved into close-quarters combat where superior marksmanship would be offset by numerical disadvantage and limited ammunition for sustained engagement. Her radio crackled with an urgent update. Ghost 79er, Base Command. Extraction helicopter inbound, ETA 7 minutes. Enemy forces converging on landing zone from multiple directions. 7 minutes to eliminate the immediate threat and reach the extraction point before enemy reinforcements could establish positions that would make helicopter operations impossible. The mathematical precision that had defined her long-range shooting was being replaced by the brutal arithmetic of survival under extreme time pressure. She acquired the second target through her rifle scope, a soldier attempting to maneuver to a better firing position while maintaining suppressive fire. The range was approximately 150 meters, close enough that the .50 caliber bullet would arrive before the target could complete his movement to cover. The shot broke cleanly, and the second enemy soldier was eliminated with the same devastating precision that had characterized her extreme-range engagements earlier in the mission. One target remaining, but her position was now known, and the enemy soldier was maintaining disciplined fire that prevented her from acquiring a clear shot while enemy reinforcements approached the tactical area. The helicopter containing her extraction team was 5 minutes away from a landing zone that might be under direct fire when they arrived. Captain Thalia Kavanaugh prepared for the final engagement that would determine whether she returned to base alive or became another casualty in a war that officially wasn't happening. The remaining enemy soldier had taken a defensive position behind a boulder that provided excellent protection while maintaining clear fields of fire toward her location. Professional tactics that indicated military training and combat experience, combined with the patience necessary to wait for tactical advantages rather than exposing himself to precision fire from her Barrett rifle. Thalia could hear the distinctive sound of additional enemy forces moving through the forest, coordinated movement that suggested the arrival of reinforcements who would establish positions that made her extraction impossible. The tactical window for eliminating the immediate threat and reaching the landing zone was closing rapidly. Base Command Ghost 79er. Final enemy contact at checkpoint. Reinforcements approaching from north and east. Request immediate extraction upon arrival. Ghost 79er Base Command. Extraction team is 3 minutes out. Landing zone must be secure for helicopter operations. 3 minutes to eliminate a well-positioned enemy soldier while avoiding additional forces that were converging on her location with the clear intention of preventing her extraction. The mathematics of tactical survival had been reduced to time, distance, and the precision required to end a firefight before it expanded beyond her ability to control. She moved laterally through the forest, using trees and natural terrain features to break the enemy soldier's line of sight while positioning for a flanking shot that would bypass his covered position. Movement under fire required balancing speed against noise discipline while maintaining awareness of sight lines that could expose her to enemy observation. Through the trees, she could see the landing zone where her extraction helicopter would arrive in less than 3 minutes. Clear ground surrounded by forest that would provide excellent fields of fire for enemy forces positioned along the perimeter. The helicopter crew would be extremely vulnerable during the brief period required for her to reach the aircraft and departure procedures. Automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions as enemy reinforcements made contact with her location. Professional fire discipline and coordinated movement that created overlapping fields of fire, designed to suppress her movement while forces maneuvered to eliminate or capture her. She had approximately 90 seconds before the tactical situation deteriorated beyond recovery. The flanking movement had positioned her for a clear shot at the enemy soldier behind the boulder, but engaging would reveal her new location to reinforcements who were establishing firing positions throughout the surrounding area. Miss the shot, and she would face coordinated fire from multiple directions with limited cover and no viable escape routes. The Barrett's crosshairs settled on the target with mathematical precision that had been developed through years of training and operational experience. Range 127 meters, negligible wind compensation required, target stationary but alert for her exact position. She controlled her breathing with the discipline that preceded every precision shot, despite the adrenaline and time pressure that characterized combat situations. The trigger broke with the clean release that sent a .50 caliber bullet across the distance between firing position and target almost instantaneously. Impact confirmed. Final checkpoint target eliminated. But enemy reinforcements were already establishing positions around the landing zone, and the sound of helicopter rotors was becoming audible through the forest canopy. Her extraction team was arriving at a location that would shortly be under direct fire from multiple directions. Base Command Ghost 79er, checkpoint neutralized, moving to extraction point under fire. She began running toward the landing zone with a controlled sprint that balanced speed against the accuracy required to return fire if enemy forces established clear shots during her movement across open ground. Behind her, automatic weapons fire indicated that her position was known, and enemy soldiers were attempting to intercept her before she could reach the helicopter. The US-60 Blackhawk appeared above the tree line, its crew executing the kind of tactical approach that minimized exposure time while providing suppressive fire if ground conditions required defensive measures. The helicopter settled into the landing zone with rotor wash that created dust clouds and vegetation movement that would complicate enemy targeting. Go, go, go. The crew chief's voice was barely audible over rotor noise and the increasing volume of enemy fire that was impacting around the landing zone perimeter. Thalia covered the final 50 meters to the helicopter, while enemy bullets created distinctive sonic cracks overhead, indicating that professional marksmen were engaging her with precision fire, despite the difficult conditions created by rotor wash and her rapid movement across uneven terrain. She reached the Blackhawk and was hauled aboard by crew members who immediately signaled for departure as enemy fire intensified around the landing zone. The helicopter lifted off with the abrupt acceleration that characterized combat extractions, gaining altitude and distance from ground threats as rapidly as possible. Through the aircraft's windows, she could see enemy soldiers emerging from concealed positions throughout the forest, confirming that the forces hunting her had been significantly larger and better organized than intelligence estimates had suggested. Ghost 79er Base Command, extraction complete, mission successful. The radio transmission marked the official conclusion of an operation that had required impossible shots, tactical survival under extreme pressure, and extraction from a combat zone where professional enemies had demonstrated both the capability and determination to prevent her escape. But as the helicopter climbed away from the mountainous terrain where she had spent 8 hours hunting and being hunted, Captain Thalia Kavanaugh understood that her carefully maintained cover as an unremarkable pilot had been permanently compromised. The Barrett .50 caliber rifle that had started this entire sequence lay across her lap, its barrel still warm from the precision shooting that had eliminated 3 enemy snipers at ranges that defied conventional military doctrine. The impossible emblem carved into the stock no longer seemed like a burden. It felt like a badge of honor earned through mathematical precision and moral courage. General Holloway would be waiting for her debriefing, along with questions about capabilities that officially didn't exist in operations that were never supposed to be discussed. But the convoy she had been sent to protect had completed its mission without casualties, and American soldiers would return home alive because of shots fired across impossible distances by someone whose existence would be classified beyond normal security protocols. The sky above the extraction helicopter was the same brilliant blue that had provided optimal shooting conditions throughout the morning, but now it felt like freedom rather than tactical exposure. She had survived 8 hours of the most challenging operational conditions she had ever encountered, proving to herself that skills developed during classified assignments could be applied successfully when American lives depended on precision performance. Her radio crackled with a personal message from the convoy commander, whose soldiers she had protected without ever being seen. Ghost 79er, this is Bravo 6. We never saw you, but we know you were there. Thank you. The gratitude was worth more than any official commendation or recognition that her operational security requirements would prevent from being awarded. She had done the work that needed to be done, using capabilities that were supposed to remain secret, achieving results that would be measured in lives saved rather than targets eliminated. The helicopter continued its flight toward the forward operating base, where her transition back to official existence would begin. But Captain Thalia Kavanaugh understood that she would never again be just another pilot flying routine missions. Some secrets, once revealed, changed everything that came after. The debriefing room at the forward operating base felt sterile and impersonal after 8 hours of tactical operations in mountainous terrain where every decision had been measured in life-or-death consequences. Captain Thalia Kavanaugh sat across from General Holloway and a collection of intelligence specialists whose security clearances allowed them access to information about operations that officially never occurred. The Barrett .50 caliber rifle lay on the conference table between them, its presence serving as physical evidence of capabilities that military doctrine suggested should not exist. The impossible emblem carved into the stock had initiated this entire sequence, transforming her from anonymous pilot into someone whose skills would be permanently documented in classified files that very few people would ever be authorized to read. Mission debrief, General Holloway began, his voice carrying the professional tone that characterized senior officers conducting post-operation analysis. 3 enemy snipers eliminated at ranges of 3,127, 2,943, and 2,761 meters respectively. Convoy successfully transited danger area without casualties. Enemy blocking forces engaged during extraction phase, with 4 additional personnel eliminated. The statistical summary reduced 8 hours of tactical complexity into numbers that could be processed by military bureaucracy, but failed to capture the mathematical precision and moral weight that had defined every decision throughout the operation. Environmental conditions were optimal for extreme-range shooting, continued Major Chen, the intelligence briefing officer. Wind speeds between 12 and 16 knots, temperature stable at -4°C, atmospheric pressure consistent throughout the operational period. Thalia listened to the clinical analysis while remembering the actual experience. The weight of the Barrett rifle across her shoulders, the controlled breathing that preceded each impossible shot, and the psychological burden of taking human lives at distances where targets never knew death was approaching. Captain, your performance exceeded all operational expectations, General Holloway said, closing the tactical summary folder. But we need to discuss the implications for your future assignments and security classification. The conversation she had been dreading since discovering that her carefully maintained cover had been compromised. For 3 years, she had successfully operated as an unremarkable A-10 pilot with solid but unremarkable performance ratings. Now she was someone whose capabilities would be permanently documented in files that changed her military career trajectory in ways that could not be reversed. "Sir, I request permission to return to normal flight operations." Request denied. Holloway's response was immediate and final. Personnel with your demonstrated capabilities cannot be assigned to routine duties when tactical situations require specialized skills that exist nowhere else in our current force structure. The trap she had seen approaching since the moment he had discovered the emblem on her rifle. Military necessity overriding personal preferences. Operational requirements taking precedence over individual desires for anonymity and routine assignments. What kind of assignments are we discussing, sir? That depends on your willingness to accept a transfer to a specialized unit that can properly utilize your capabilities while providing the operational security necessary to protect both you and the classified nature of the missions you would be conducting. A specialized unit meant leaving behind the familiar routine of A-10 operations, fellow pilots who had become friends, and the comfortable anonymity that had defined her life for 3 years. It meant returning to the world of impossible shots and operations that officially never happened. "Sir, I need time to consider the implications." "Unfortunately, time is not available," replied Major Chen, producing another folder marked with security classifications that made Thalia's clearance seem routine. Intelligence reports indicate that enemy forces are deploying additional sniper teams with capabilities similar to those you engaged today. We need counter-sniper assets with proven effectiveness at extreme ranges. More operations like today's mission. More impossible shots across terrain where mathematical precision determined whether American soldiers lived or died. More time spent hunting and being hunted by professional enemies who understood that the elimination of superior marksmen was worth significant risk and resource expenditure. The specialized unit would provide enhanced equipment, dedicated support personnel, and operational parameters that recognize the unique requirements of extreme-range interdiction, continued General Holloway. You would be working with others who possess similar capabilities and understand the psychological demands of this kind of precision shooting. Others like her. Personnel whose skills existed in the shadow spaces between official military doctrine and operational necessity, whose work was measured in lives saved rather than targets eliminated. What kind of operational tempo? Deployment schedules would depend on tactical requirements, but significantly less frequent than conventional assignments. Quality over quantity. Missions where your specific capabilities provide solutions that conventional forces cannot achieve. Fewer missions, but each one would carry the kind of stakes that she had experienced during today's operation. American lives depending on her ability to make impossible shots under extreme pressure, while maintaining the operational security necessary to protect capabilities that enemies would pay enormous prices to neutralize. "Sir, if I accept this assignment, what happens to my current squadron?" They would be informed that you have been transferred to a classified assignment that requires your specific qualifications. Standard operating procedure for personnel with specialized skills. Her fellow pilots would never know that their colleague who flew routine A-10 missions possessed capabilities that had saved American lives at distances they couldn't even imagine. The anonymity she had carefully maintained would be replaced by a different kind of secrecy, official recognition within classified circles that officially didn't exist. "I need to ask one question, sir. Are the missions legal?" General Holloway leaned forward, his expression conveying the weight of decisions that senior officers made when conventional alternatives had proven inadequate. Every mission would be conducted under proper authorization, with clear rules of engagement and operational parameters that comply with applicable legal frameworks. Legal but classified, authorized but never officially acknowledged. The kind of work that allowed democratic societies to function while protecting them from threats that could not be addressed through conventional military operations. "Sir, I accept the assignment." The words emerged from her mouth with the finality that marked irreversible decisions. She was choosing to return to the world of impossible shots and operations that officially never happened, but now with official recognition and support that her previous assignments had lacked. "Welcome to Ghost Unit," General Holloway said, extending his hand with the formality that marked significant career transitions. "Your new commanding officer will brief you on operational procedures and security protocols within 72 hours. Captain Thalia Kavanaugh shook the general's hand and realized that her life had just changed in ways that could never be reversed. The Barrett rifle that had betrayed her secret would now become the tool that defined her professional identity within military circles that most people would never know existed. Outside the debriefing room, the sun was setting over the airfield where her A-10 Warthog sat waiting for missions that would never come. Tomorrow, she would begin the transition from pilot to specialist sniper, from anonymous operator to someone whose capabilities were officially recognized within the classified world of extreme-range interdiction. The sky above the base was turning the brilliant orange that marked optimal shooting conditions during evening hours, but now it felt like a promise rather than a tactical consideration. She would continue doing the work that needed to be done, using skills that few people possessed, protecting American lives through mathematical precision and moral courage. Some secrets, once revealed, opened doors that led to places where the impossible became routine. 3 months after her transfer to Ghost Unit, Captain Thalia Kavanaugh stood on a shooting range designed for precision marksmanship that extended beyond conventional military doctrine. Targets positioned at distances exceeding 4,000 meters challenged the fundamental limits of what most people considered possible with small arms, but represented routine training requirements for personnel whose operational missions demanded capabilities that officially didn't exist. The Barrett .50 caliber rifle that had initiated her career transformation had been replaced by newer equipment that incorporated technological advances specifically designed for extreme-range